My friends, welcome to this episode of the Outdoor Gear Review. I hope you all are doing well. For today's episode, I'm out here at Lone Wolf Mountain to perform a field test on a new OneTigris stove that the company calls the Titanium Mini Wood Stove. The thing is this, folks. The stove, it's not really mini. As you're about to see, the stove is actually quite large. Currently, I'm hiking around Lone Wolf Mountain here to find a good spot to film this. I want to find a good sheltered spot so you all don't have to hear a ton of wind noise. As it always is here in the mountains, it's windy today. Good news, folks. We have a winter storm coming in later this week. The first big winter storm of the season, finally. Let's cross our fingers and hope it happens. I was going to film over here, but this is not going to work. It's too windy. I'm going to search around, find a good spot, and I'll bring you all back in just a minute. All right, folks. I think this is going to work well. It's breezy, but it's not super windy like the northern side of the mountain here. It's insane just how warm it is today. Whew. I'm sweating. With the stove here, you do receive this storage pouch. As you can see, the overall size of this is rather large. It's thin, but you can tell this is going to be a big stove. Here in a minute, we'll go over the dimensions. One of the reasons why I decided to get this into review was because of one of OneTigris's previous wood stoves, the splicing stove. I dislike that thing. My review was not very good for it. I didn't think it was a very well thought out product. So as soon as I saw that they were offering this one, which they recently brought out to the market, I was curious whether or not this was going to be a better stove than the splicing one. So I went ahead, I ordered it, and today we're going to do a field test with this stove. You receive 3 pot supports, you receive 3 wall pieces, and also the burner plate. Once you have the sides of the stove together, you can insert the plate, which drops in just like that. With the pot supports, they set up in a triangle formation as well. With this stove being set up now, there's a few things that I'm worried about that concern me. First off is the plate on the bottom. There's no air holes in it. Because there's no air holes in it, the performance may be hindered, and at the same time, it may be more difficult to light this wood stove than some others. Next, there's no feed port on any of the sides of this stove. That means that you have to feed the stove from the top, which is unfortunate and not very well thought out because of this. You're going to have your pot on top. That means that you're going to have to feed from like the side going in. When you have a fire in the stove, the heat's coming out the top, that's not going to be easy to do. And in fact, it may be very difficult if you have a large size pot on top of this. Yeah, I wonder why they didn't do any feed ports on the side here. That's strange. All right. You should be able to see here, folks, just how large this stove is and how much space you have inside of this. This can hold a lot of fuel. I've already spoken of the lack of the feeding port, but at the same time, there's no real good way to light this stove other than from the top. Because all of the holes surrounding the body here are so small, even lighting the center of this is going to be difficult. Ah, okay. With this kettle on top of this stove here, you can see how much space is left for actually feeding it, and there's not much. At the same time, all of the heat is escaping from those small holes. So feeding this at times could be tricky. Let's see how this works with a large pot. This is a 750 milliliter TOGR titanium cup pot. It doesn't really fit. I would feel uneasy about using this pot with this stove. This hole here is simply too large. You can sit it on the edge. I guess that would work. But to be honest, I don't like that. Overall, the performance of this stove is not bad, but unfortunately there are some issues here. First off, there's no feeding port, and that's a big problem here. There's no easy way to feed this stove. You have to go from the top at an angle, which means that oftentimes that you have like these dead spots inside of the stove itself, where you don't have fuel that's burning. So as your fuel burns, you have these dead spots. Overall, that translates to a slower duration of whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, because oftentimes you'll have to remove the pot or the cup or the pan and feed that way. The decorations on the side make for excellent air holes, so that's not an issue. I was concerned about that with the burner plate because there's no holes in it. But no, this gets plenty of air. Another issue with this stove are the pot supports. They're almost too far apart. There's no way to bring them in. So you really have to use large size cups, pots, and pans with this stove. Again, the company calls this the mini. It's really not that mini. Speaking of which, let's go over some stats real quick. Let's go over the details concerning this stove. Again, this is their titanium mini stove. When it's stored, it is 8.3 inches by 7.5 inches, and it's about half an inch thick. When it's set up, it's 7.7 inches by 6.7 inches. The titanium for this stove is 1 millimeter thick. The weight with the storage bag, 14.6 ounces. The price, $50. As you all can see, it features a triangular design, and those decorative air holes that I just spoke about, those are laser cut. As far as this field test goes, I'm pretty much done. This was a good test to try out the stove. Already I see some issues here. If you're going to buy this stove, this is what I recommend. As soon as you buy it, take your Dremel tool and cut a big hole in one of the sides. Make a feeding port. You can cut out one of these TOGR heads here and make an excellent feeding port for this stove. As is, the overall design really holds itself back. It does perform very well. The burner plate on the bottom, it doesn't hinder the stove at all, and it does give you an additional benefit that it doesn't allow hot embers to hit the ground underneath the stove. That's definitely a plus. As far as efficiency goes, the stove's not bad, but it's not a gasifier stove, so it does go through material, through your fuel quite fast. Lighting the stove and getting it running can be a challenge because there's no feeding port. And I will say this, even after a long duration burn, we've boiled 2 pots of water here. I see no warping at all. I'm sure that you could and you will get some warping over time, but with 1mm thick titanium, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Now, my friends, I would like for you all to sound off in the comment section down below. What do you all think about this OneTigris stove? This is one that has just recently hit the market, and I don't think there's anyone who's done any sort of videos about it yet. In fact, there's no reviews on the OneTigris website about this yet. I'm going to continue testing this out. This is a first look, a first field test. In the future, I will share with you all my ultimate thoughts about this stove once I have more testing underneath my belt. While the stove doesn't have any deal-breaking issues, the lack of feeding port is a problem. Luckily, that is something that you can address yourself with a Dremel tool. If you want to see me cut a hole in this thing, hit the like button and I'll do that. Thank you all very much for joining me for this episode. Hit the like button before you go. It does help the channel. Everyone, take care, be well, strength and honor.